Nuance of voter choices, asking the question, is party loyalty still a determining factor in South African politics? And what role do demographics like race, age and gender play? The research shines a light onto the profile of the South African voter and the power of trust in President Cyril Ramaphosa in shaping voter preferences. So Professor Leila Patel, South African Research Chair in Welfare and Social Development at the University of Johannesburg, joins us now. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. So let's just first start with the issue of trust in the presidency since wave one, because you've different phases of this research. Let's start with that.
So that's correct. We've done two phases of a 3-year study, and we compare our findings with the first wave, which was at the end of 2017, and now we've got the second data set. So we see big changes between the two waves, in that previously there was a big focus. What was a predictor for voting behaviour was governance, socioeconomic rights questions, corruption. Those were uppermost in people's minds in their choices. This time around, we see that it is trust in the president that is a significant indicator of people's voter choices. And secondly is the question of support for the Party of Liberation. So it seems that support for President Ramaphosa has also begun to rekindle support for the Party of Liberation again. So I think those two things seem to go together.
Okay, so maybe let's just stick with that trust in the president. So the Ramaphosa factor, what questions did you ask?
So we asked a number of questions around trust in institutions and trust in the political leaders. So in our 2017 study, we had President Jacob Zuma as the president, and this time we had obviously President Ramaphosa. So they could, respondents could indicate their support on a scale of 1 to 5, where on the one hand it's the lowest level of trust, and on the other hand is strong trust. So what is very significant is the shift in trust since the end of the Zuma period, and that increases by 29 percentage points.
Now, I want you to take us through the two different models that you used and what the significance of that is, because, as you say, there has been a shift. So there clearly was something that forced people to zone in, zero in on that aspect.
Yes. So not to be too technical, we've got a very big data set of 3,400 respondents in a national sample. It's weighted, it's representative of 38 million people. And we asked a set of questions around institutional trust. And we had in that set of questions the trust in the president. And when we analyze that, we see then that the trust in governance or trust in institutions and the president is significant. But when we take the president out of that equation, then trust in institutions is no longer a factor in people's voting, and he becomes the game changer, as it were.
And the importance of that number of respondents in wave 2, which you mentioned, is the fact that it reflects the country's urban and rural split. Take us through those figures and what exactly they highlighted.
So 70% of the respondents are in urban areas, and that's been a big shift in our country since 1994, when we had a pretty equal split. So that represents the situation in the country. The gender split is also pretty equal. Most of the respondents, or fair proportion of the respondents, about 46-48%, were between 18 and 34 years of age. So we have a very young group of respondents but that reflects our young population. 10% are over 65, and age does emerge as a factor in how who they vote for. Income is very important, though, to be so, because in our study, we find 58% of the respondents in our study earn under 8,000 Rand a month. So we're talking here about low income and lower middle income respondents. And that's really reflective of the income distribution in our country.
And corruption, I see, is something that has also come to the fore in terms of what is important and is driving this election. So do people differentiate between perceptions of corruption and what has been proven to be actual corruption? And where do they get their information from mostly?
So no, we didn't ask questions like that. We basically asked, do you think that corruption increased over the past year? And there we see 72% of people thought that corruption had increased.
And in terms of the parties that they would vote for and what's influencing that decision, what was the response?
So we see support for the ANC broadly as being trust in the President Ramaphosa. Secondly, it is loyalty to the party. And the third factor that is critical is if a person, a respondent or a grant beneficiary thought that they would lose their grant if they voted for another party, they were more than twice as likely to vote for the ANC. And I think that that can be interpreted in different ways. But it certainly does say that there is a preference for social grants as a government policy, and that grant beneficiaries don't trust other parties to be protecting their right to social grants in the same way. And we know that over 80% of grant beneficiaries know that they have a right to social grants. So those were the main findings. The interesting one on corruption, though, is this, that those who believe that corruption increased tended were more likely to vote for the opposition.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor Leila Patel, the South African Research Chair in Welfare and Social Development at the University of Johannesburg.